Coming up today, making history on the show here. First time ever breaking out the quad box if you're watching on YouTube, with 3 guests joining me. All of the guys from the SeaHawkers pod. Brandon, Clinton, and Adam are all going to be joining me today. And I'll give you away a little secret. If you stick around till the very end, actually a mystery 4th guest joins the show. At a certain point, you want to stay tuned for that. But get those guys' perspectives on everything that's been happening over at the Vmac this offseason with the coaching change and some of the things we've seen throughout the draft process, undrafted free agency, some of the reports coming out from how rookie minicamp has gone, some of their favorite moments of the draft, and look ahead to some bigger picture issues as they see things moving forward with new coach Mike Macdonald. The guys from SeaHawkers podcast joining me today on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan VMs.
From time to time, some of you will reach out to me and say, hey, Dan, love the show, don't love the ads. What's with that? Well, unfortunately, it's just kind of the reality of YouTube and audio podcasting these days. But there's a way you can work around that. If you watch on YouTube and you have an account, you can sign up for YouTube Premium, and then you can watch anything without ads. And so you can just do that through your settings there. And if you prefer audio podcasts, you can listen to the show anywhere, but on Spotify, specifically for a very low monthly fee, you can sign up for exclusive ad-free episodes. That's only on Spotify. I will put that link in the description. And if you just want to support the show, you can hit that super thanks or buy me a coffee. But until then, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. That helps support the network. And if you hit that bell button, you won't miss any notifications of future episodes. Let's get into this. The guys from SeaHawkers podcast been trying to get this together for a while, but matching schedules and different parts of the country and different time zones, we were able to make it work today. Great conversation. Hope you enjoy it. Here it is. All sorts of things happening for the first time today on the show. First of all, first time I've ever had 3 guests at the same time. So I've had this little frame thing with 4 boxes in it for over a year and haven't been able to use it. Also, you've seen Clinton on the show. Of course, you've seen Brandon on the show. First time for Adam Emmert, the guys from the SeaHawkers podcast from all necks of the woods in the United States joining me tonight. Welcome, guys.
Hey, Dan. Thanks for having us all. And we could add first time doing jazz hands on the show.
There it is. I'm tickled.
You don't have to join in, Dan. It's fine.
I mean, nobody wants to see me dance in any way, shape, or form. It's really no.
Well, Dan, definitely excited that we are the first 4 box. You know, the Seahawks Forever Voltron we got going here. So
it's a quad box.
Look, yeah, appreciate it, man. This is fun.
One of you asked me before we hit record, you made the reference to Red Zone, right? Which just occurred to me. I want to ask you guys this. Are you a little worried? There was some clarity this week that it sounds like ESPN is going to acquire NFL Network, right? You guys been following that at all? And take over their programming. That NFL Network is apparently failing financially, organizationally.
I don't buy that. I don't buy that.
Does that bother you that ESPN might be in control of NFL Network in any way, shape, or form? That Red Zone may be changing?
I know it bothers me. There's a reason why I don't really watch ESPN hardly at all anymore. And when I go for NFL coverage, I go to NFL Network. I like their coverage better. I like most of their hosts a lot better. I think it's just a better product overall. I'm with Clinton, though. I don't buy that they're losing money on NFL Network. Not for a second. There's no way but maybe they're going to make more on a sale than they're going to make in the next 10 years just running the network. Who knows?
I don't know. There's a lot of networks that fail there that I scratch my head and wonder, how does that thing lose money? Because it seems like it would be hard to do. And so there's some bad managers out there in media.
I don't know. I saw some folks got fired from NFL Network, media personalities. I know they were moving like Good Morning Football. They were, moving out to the West and doing a different format. So there's been some tea leaves and now this. I still don't buy that the NFL Network doesn't make money hand over fist. I just don't buy it. So I don't know why they would want to sell. It's something. I can't put my finger on it. And I think ESPN's product is inferior. So if it went that way, it would suck.
I agree. I stopped watching ESPN years ago. I'm with you, Adam. And And as long as they don't touch red zone, leave Scott Hansen in that chair and just continue, like, don't mess with a good thing, right? And then we'll all be okay. The schedule comes out next week. Any particular game or just kind of idea that any of you are looking to see? Well, let me ask it this way to be a little bit more clear. Who would you prefer to see us open the season with? We'll go, what does it look like to the viewer? We'll go counterclockwise. Adam, start with you.
Oh, don't start with me because I had to bring up the actual opponents because I don't remember the entire schedule off the top of my head. Honestly, I'm sure that there's a lot of different options that are out of division and all that, but really, I would want to see the Rams right away. I want to get the taste out of my mouth of getting swept last year. I feel like Mike Macdonald, I want to see that matchup against McVay because that's the whole reason he's here, right? He's the defensive guru. He's here to stop the McShanahans. And right. I want to see that.
Yeah, I think for me, I also want to see an in-division opponent, but for me, because I think we start off with game one at home. I suspect that's what it's supposed to look like. And so to get that first win, to get it out and have it at home under Mike Macdonald, I would want that over the 49ers.
Okay, this is a good question. I think Brandon's right that we'll probably be home because we have an extra home game this year. So probably home. So going with the probablys, I am going to say I want to play the Vikings first because I'd like to play the rookie like his first week and don't let JJ McCarthy get it going. So bring the McDonald heat, a little bit of like Michigan versus Michigan, maybe confuse the young man. I expect him to be the starter day one. And that seems to me like we could do that and kind of mess up his NFL debut, which is always kind of delightful.
It's interesting to dive into just that how we think and how different fans think, because I'm sure with all the changes happening in Seattle over the last 6 months, that there are a lot of fans that want an easy landing, right? A soft landing to begin with. But I'm with you guys. I want to find out right away, like what we have. Not that week one is going to determine anything. They could lose by 20, right? And it's fine because we're just getting started with a new regime. But I was talking to Rob Guerrero, the 49ers Network, the other day, and we were recounting last year, like we didn't play the Niners until week 10? And then we played them twice in 3 weeks. I hate that. Like, I know scheduling is a massive job in the NFL and it's hard to like make everybody happy, but that's dumb. That's just dumb. I'd like to see right off the bat. Now, I will say this though, the Rams, and maybe this leads me into my next question. Who scares you more right now? The Rams or the 49ers? Because I'm not so sure that it's not the Rams. I just think what they did in free agency to fix that interior offensive line, and then they went out and had a draft that I like way more than I want to. Like, who scares you more?
Well, the Rams don't have Aaron Donald anymore, so I like that part of it.
Braden Fisk, and they added Jared Verse, and they added Brennan Jackson. It loaded up on defense.
Yeah, they did add some nice pieces to it. But gosh, the 40, I've a big part of it too is Shanahan. It's tough because we don't know this team at all. So I don't know what our weaknesses are anymore, other than you can look at some of the areas where, they didn't improve a ton at linebacker or at safety, but we're supposed to be seeing this Mike Macdonald defense, and we keep most of the offense together. So I don't really know where those weaknesses match up yet with the opponents. So I think that's part of the reason why I lean toward Division 2, because then I'll start to know, because I know the other teams pretty well. Now I'll know that we did shore up certain areas that I wanted to see a shore up.
I think for me, it's got to be the Niners still. And it's closer. It's a lot closer than I think a lot of people think, really, because with that brutal loss coming from the Super Bowl there, I think they're going to have a rough go this year. This is going to be a bad Super Bowl hangover for them. That's a prediction for me. Now, as far as the Rams go, I think why I put them just below the Niners, even though I think they're going to take a little bit of a step back this year, just because of the inner turmoil from that bad loss, is the fact that I can't trust Stafford to put together 2 back-to-back healthy seasons like that. that feels super unlikely to me. And if he does get injured going through the season, I think it could be tough sledding for them.
Dan, I'll hop in. Just say I think the Rams are better. I think the Rams are better at this point. I do believe in Super Bowl hangovers. If this is all with the huge caveat of Stafford's got to stay healthy. The thing with Stafford is, for me, for my money, I thought he was last year's MVP. I was saying it the last 6 weeks of the year, being like, I think that dude deserves MVP votes. Josh Allen too didn't really get that many. I think McVay's better than Shanahan. And then their last two drafts have been monstrous. I also hate the friggin' 49ers, and I want to believe this, but I'm not a huge Purdy guy. I think Purdy is a good NFL quarterback that when you heat him up a little bit of heat, he kind of crumbles. And we just got to pick the ball off next time and not just like let it hit our hands. But with Stafford, I mean, he's, whatever. It doesn't really matter with him. You can heat him up. He's still going to get out of enough stuff and basically, they just get enough balls out on time. So I think the Rams are poised to overtake the 49ers. And also I think Trent Williams takes another small step back with an offensive line that's meh for the 49ers. It's not great. It's not great anymore. It's sliding into okay land, and that's going to hurt them.
Is week one's always fascinating, and you hear this all the time, that it's week two that we really kind of find out what teams are, and sometimes you learn things on week one and sometimes you don't. I remember the home opener against the Bengals 5 years ago when the John Ross tipped Hail Mary at the end of the half game with I'm blanking on the Bengals. It was Zach Taylor's first game as head coach. And so, you're fascinated to see, you think the Seahawks are going to roll in week one. Oh, we're playing a bad team with a brand new head coach. And they end up having to squeak it out at the end because Pete Carroll played such a vanilla conservative game plan on both sides of the ball because they didn't know what to expect. But then last year, we get the Rams week one, and Stafford does to us what he does to us, and we see Puka do what he does, and it's like, oh yeah, that's who they were. Like, we found out right away that's who that team was.
I thought going into the playoffs, they had would they lose to Detroit by a point or two, if I'm recalling that correctly, right? So in that second round, it was very, very competitive. So they were right there. And I think they would have played, either way. I think they made their way into the upper echelon last year. And I mean, again, look, Aaron Donald is one of one, right? So we hope we drafted
the
one.
Entire team crumbles without Aaron Donald. We can forget about the Rams.
Then we'll know, right?
I hope that's accurate. I just think they've done a really nice job of like preparing for the day, because maybe it came a little sooner than they wanted, but it was inevitable, right?
I'll say this too, and then we'll actually start talking about the Seahawks a little bit. But when I think about the 49ers and Shanahan and the Rams and McVay, it occurs to me that, I think last year, more than any year since he became a head coach, we found out just how good a head coach Sean McVay is. Because going into last season, none of us thought they were going to be that good. Like, I had a guy on from the Rams side of things before the season. He said, yeah, they're going to win 10 games to go to the playoffs. And I thought he was nuts.
Yeah.
Because we thought it was Aaron Donald and then 10 no names and kind of a broken down aging quarterback. I think we'll find out this coming year just how good of a coach Kyle Shanahan really is. Coming off, as you said, the Super Bowl hangover, another disappointing loss, tons and tons of pressure from that fan base there to actually win something. And now they're getting into that point where the salary cap's become a thing. They're actually over for 2025 at the moment. They're looking at cap issues. Like,
they have diva wide receivers, Dan. You got to throw that in there.
Yeah,
right?
We don't know. Do they? We don't know.
I mean, I think to Clint's point, I think they're dealing with a lot of those issues that teams who actually win a Super Bowl then have to deal with, because a lot of these players are saying, hey, I'm at the top of my game. I'm due to get paid. And they have just a lot of those types of guys. And, who do they decide to keep? Who do they decide to get rid of? They have to make those types of decisions now. And we saw how it worked out for Seattle. And fortunately, we had our chip and when we dealt with those issues.
Yeah, nobody knows more than we do what it's like to come off a disappointing Super Bowl loss and try to put things together the next year, right?
Yeah, try
absolutely. And you heard after that game just the heartbreak from San Francisco and just some of the players throwing other people under the bus. And that's how it starts. And at the end of the day, you're not going to hear much about it until Seth Wickersham comes by 3 years from now and does some big expose on it. But I guarantee you there's more drama behind the scenes with that team this year than previous years.
Yeah. Well, I think it's going to be one of the biggest storylines in the NFC this year is just how they respond. Absolutely. Because that window, you talk about salary cap issues and eventually have to pay these guys, but they have a couple of major injuries a couple of their defenders that they're coming back from, Hufanga, Greenlaw. You only have so much more time in this rookie quarterback contract window to take advantage of. And even with that, they're over the cap. So it'll be fascinating to see. Let's talk about our team. And I want to do this. I have not addressed this on my show in any kind of depth since it all kind of started. And I listen to you guys, but I don't know that I've heard any episode where you guys dove into this either. So I want to get your thoughts on this because it kind of came up again this week. This whole idea of changing things inside the Vmac, right? And changing the Pete Carroll messaging and not just the literal messaging, but also the stuff on the walls, right? So much was made of that, the basketball hoop being gone. And then Leonard Williams let slip that the pictures were taken away in that one hallway. And then, there was a little bit of damage control. And then there was the video on draft day of Schneider and Macdonald in front of the tip picture, which
hilarious.
Maybe they had to pull that out of the storeroom and hang it back up to do that video. I'm not sure.
Different part of the building.
Right. And then, they did the other kind of trollish video where they gave the sort of walkthrough video to the war room, showing all the pictures that they still have. And then this week, of course, first time really to put helmets on and get out and work in the rookie mini camp. And the music is almost non-existent. Corbin Smith described it as it sounded like someone left the music on in the locker room just a little bit too loud. What are your thoughts? And let's go the other way around this time. We'll start with you, Clinton. Your thoughts on all that has Mike Macdonald gone too far in stripping away some of that legacy from the Carroll years, or is he doing the right thing?
To be concise about it, I think he's doing what he wants to do as the new head coach. And he's our coach. He's the coach, right? So to me, it's the right thing. Look, I work in business. I work in technology. I run marketing for a technology company. And guess what? When new people come in, they want to do things the way they've done them before, that they have seen be very successful for themselves. And they too are professionals. And there's lots of different ways to skin the cat, if you will. I'm 1000% fine with Macdonald doing what he wants to do to make it his own. And I think at the end of it too, if he gets the players believing in the system, and they play the way he wants them to play, which is going to be a very, very tough brand of football, I think we'll be happy fans and he'll get what he wants as a head coach. So I'm cool with it right now, Dan.
Brandon?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why you didn't hear us talk about some of the decorations around the building, to borrow from Allen Iverson, we're talking about decorations, man. Talking about decorations. So it's one thing to absolutely strip everything away. One of the things that I think, if anybody's ever been to the Vmac, that is a real unique piece is they have an entire wall that has every single player's name that ever played for the Seahawks on a giant wall outside of one of the indoor practice facilities. And if they were to take something like that away, then that would be something I think worth talking about. But to remove a wall that has pictures of, Pete Carroll holding up the trophy along with Russell Wilson crying after the NFC Championship win, it's stuff like that Mike Macdonald's not going to have any kind of connection to. And so those are Pete's memories. And those are really cool memories, I think, for us as Seahawks fans. But for the new coach to come in and look at that and go, I want my own I Love Me wall. That doesn't shock me at all.
Yeah. Adam.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the day, man, Coach Macdonald has to come in and make this his team. I mean, let's be honest. Pete's tenure in everything that he has done for the Seahawks and everything, you'll never be able to erase it. It's not going to be gone by just removing a few pictures from the office. The legacy will always be there, and we'll always be thankful for Pete. Like I love Pete. I was a little sad to see him go, to be honest. But with that said, Mike's a young, new head coach, and he's got a first chance at a first impression here. And he needs to get his messaging across and get his style of practice across. You talked about the music. I heard him asked about that, and his response was, well, we'll still have the music, but we still need to be able to coach while we're out there. We still need to be able to talk. We still need to be able to do their thing. And so it's not like he's eliminating it, but he is putting his stamp on things. And I think, especially being a young coach, I think he needs to do that early to kind of get that respect from the players right out of the gate.
Yeah. And he also said, to your point, he said, we'll figure it out. Like, it may change. It may get louder. And I like that about him. I think my first take on the whole thing was, I think it'd be really cringy if he had left everything the way it was. Like, hey guys, take your shots at the basketball hoop. And you're trying to come in and establish yourself, as you guys say, as someone who's a strong leader, and you're going to do it your way. I appreciate that he was willing to start over with a clean slate. I also appreciate that he isn't just borrowing from what he learned with the Ravens too. They talk about the Ravens way. He's not talking about the Seahawk way. He even said early on that, like, no, we'll come up with our own saying. Like, that's cool. Like, because we all know, as much as, and I'm with you guys, I love Pete, felt like it was time for a change, but love the guy, always will. But if he were to get another coaching job tomorrow, guess what they'd hear in that new locale, right? Win forever, always compete. All the same slogans and sayings would go right up, just like it was here in Seattle. Nothing would be different. So I like the fact that he's adapting to that. I'll relate a quick story. I had an opportunity last night to talk to somebody who's been in the Seahawks organization for 20 years and who works directly with players and a lot of times with their families and their parents, and how to get passes and how to educate them on what it's like now that their sons are playing in the NFL. And we host a lot of those events, and we did one last night. And it was the first time I've really gotten a chance to talk to her, one-on-one in all the times that I've worked with her. And I'm always afraid to ask about the changes because Pete was so revered, right? I don't want to be offensive or step on someone's toes if they feel like it was the wrong move. And she said, to a person in that building, everyone loves him, but they all agreed it was absolutely a time for a change. And she even said to me that the attitude's better. People had started to tune things out. Players, coaches, she mentioned, other front office personnel, the message got stale and everyone's invigorated now. I mean, it's all new. Scary. It could fail, right? This could bomb. Mike Macdonald could be a dud. We've seen it before. Nobody thought Brandon Staley was going to be a dud, right?
Right.
Is any part of that scare any of you? Do any of you ever take a moment to entertain the idea that this might not work?
Oh,
Yeah.
That's one of the very first things I thought about it. I mean, people that watch our show, they know I thought Pete deserved one more year. I thought that with this draft in particular, I think it really would have made a big difference for him in the end of his tenure, just getting stronger in the trenches and everything they needed to do. Now, undoubtedly, the message had gotten stale and, time for a change. If it sounds like that's what they were all thinking inside the building, that's fine. But, I know what Pete's going to bring. I know that we're going to be, I don't feel like we were that far away, a few defensive pieces in, they're going to be in the mix in the playoffs once again under Pete this year. And so to throw that away, to bring in the complete unknown of Mike Macdonald, who his resume has been outstanding. And of all of the coaching candidates that we could have chosen in this draft cycle, if he wasn't my first, he was my second. Like I really wanted that defensive guru to go up against the offensive gurus that we face in our division. And I like the hire. I like what I'm hearing. I like some of the early actions. But with all that said, boy, it's a big jump into the unknown. And just throwing out 9, 10, 11 wins a year consistently that Pete Carroll brought us, for sure, that you could mark it down on your calendar, it's scary to throw that out.
Yeah, and we're starting to see, I think, the consequences of it too as fans, because I've seen a number of people posting in our Discord saying, "Oh, look, Colin Cowherd has us as 4th in the division, and now so and so has us ranked low in what other preseason poll." And my message to people is get used to it, because now that we've made this change at coach, it's a lot easier for media people to go, well, it's unknown. We'll put the Seahawks at the bottom. And then if they surprise us, then great. If not, there's no pressure to come out and say, oh, well, I predict the Seahawks will be finished number 1 in the NFC West because they've got a brand new head coach. He's going to turn everything around. They're that close. It's a lot easier to predict a team like that being at the bottom of the division.
Yeah, I'll chime in quick that I agree with what the two dudes said. The piece for me too, Dan and team, is like with Macdonald, we kind of know what he's going to try and go do. He's very outward about it. Wants that, be the whole multiplicity effect and everything he does there, right? And it's like, okay, we could go watch the Ravens, and all right, is it going to work without Roquan Smith? Roquan Smith? We'll find out. We'll see. We'll see if it works. The other side of it, though, like the Grubb hire, like that to me is like, what is that going to look like? I know what that looked like at UW, but that wasn't an NFL offense for the most part run at UW. So, Adam had talked about that a lot in the terms of can and how does that translate? So Macdonald, like, okay, we know what he's done and what he wants to do. Grubb, I think, has to take what he's done and learned and then make something newish that will work in the NFL while still kind of bringing in some of the things that he's done and has worked really well at the college level. And is that even possible? Because we've seen that kind of stuff flame out a lot too, Dan.
Absolutely. Yeah. I kind of, the more I sit with this and watch it from afar, I kind of have come to the conclusion that he's got to win. He's got to win. He's got to win early, because the thing about Pete is everyone loved playing for him. Even players that thought they were tired of the message and left, then they went and saw the way things are conducted in other places, and they wanted to come back. Like, that culture was attractive. It was a fun environment. It was an easy environment. And maybe that in part is what led to the demise on the field is maybe guys didn't play with that edge that they needed to. Right. So if you're going to do things in a more, for lack of a better term, vanilla manner, then you're probably going to need to win to get guys to want to play for you. Unless you just draft them and they don't have a choice. So let's talk about that prospect or that process. So much has been said. And I actually, John Schneider did his last show that he's going to do this offseason on Seattle 710 the other day. And I really loved that he's done that the last couple of years, because he seems like he's getting more comfortable with being open and being as transparent as he can be. But I felt like he was frustrated the other day because he got asked yet again by Bob Shelton, about, I forget the exact question, but it was something about like how different it was without Pete there. And I felt like he had just had enough. Like, he'd been asked about that 1,000 times. Right. And he'd given the answer 1,001 times that it really isn't that different. But did you guys, as you were watching the draft process leading up to the draft and then the draft itself, in the players they took and the way they went about doing things, did you sense that anything was different than it ever has been before under Pete?
Well, one difference, I don't think we ever saw John's crew out in front of the media ahead of the draft. So that part
that was cool.
was a little bit new. So, and I think that was, John maybe wanting to give some of those guys a little bit of media time, a little bit of shine. And so, yeah, that part was cool. In terms of, I mean, there's so much of the process that we probably don't know about to know that it's different. But I mean, the fact that Macdonald and crew didn't even go to the combine because they were so new to coaching, it had to have made a difference. But it definitely, I think John probably did his best to show that he was kind of in control of that process, and he would be because he's had so much experience and time doing it.
I don't know if I noticed any huge changes per se, but a couple of things that make me a little nervous. One, saying constantly throughout the process leading up to the draft, well, we're kind of behind the 8 ball because we hired a new coach. Oh, we're just trying to get some things figured out with, the coaches getting settled in and trying to get on the same page. I mean, how many times did we hear that, trying to be, what was it, synchronicity or whatever the word it was that they kept using, that they wanted to be, all as one. And that sort of thing made me be like, Oh boy. Okay. So this really is all John's show for sure. Now, with that said, I love this draft. This is the draft I wanted last year. Trenches centric and, a big pick on the defensive line, especially in the middle. I think that these things are going to pay dividends for the Seahawks going forward. And maybe it speaks a little bit to Mike's philosophy, right? He kept talking about building the spine of the defense, and they took a lot of players in the trenches, and I actually love it.
For me, I was on the Troy Fatanu train. Like I wanted him 16th overall. And that was the guy I was just, basically fixated on. With that, I also did not think that a player like Haynes would fall to 81 and we'd have to do some maneuvering. And I was like, can we, will we be able to? Did not think we had the chips to really kind of make it happen. And then it all worked out, so like they got Murphy. And I actually preferred Newton leading up to the draft. I was like, oh, I think he's more productive. I like maybe it's the orange and the Illinois uniforms. I don't know. But Murphy's who he is. He's great, I think. And then Haynes second, that's a very good one too. And no way would we have been as strong if we did go Fatanu and try to get a defensive tackle. Most likely doesn't work out that way. The rest of it though, maybe sans Tyrese Knight or the edges of Tyrese and then Michael, is it Jarrell or Gerald? How does he say his name?
I've heard Gerald more than Jarrell.
Okay. So Gerald, everything in the middle there of that sandwich, I feel was like floor picks, like high floor, like good, solid floor, which to me kind of screamed more Macdonald. Hey, I know what I want and I could make good players out of these things versus your Tariq Woolen spark trait off the chart guy. And so I thought a little bit of Macdonald showed up there just to get some dudes they like that they think they can mold into usable NFL players with a pretty constant floor. So that was something that stood out, at least for me a little bit in that centerpiece.
As I look back over how the draft unfolded, I'm still just struck by how lucky they got. And I don't mean that in any kind of a, derogatory way. Sometimes in the draft, you have to get lucky. Every year we talk about the 2 or 3 organizations that just seem to sit and let the draft come to them and pick good players every time, Baltimore and Philadelphia. And sometimes that requires luck. Other teams doing things you don't expect or other teams doing dumb things. And I think the fact that there was the run on all the offensive players early allowed Murphy to fall to them. And clearly he was their top pick on their wish list. He might not have been the number 1 player on their board, but I think he was the guy that he was hoping most realistically would fall to him. And then the reason, and I'm with you, I loved Troy Fatanu. I mean, now we've come to learn that he wasn't even on their draft board for medical reasons. But every time that I did one of, the million mock drafts that I did, and I took Fatanu early, I never liked the way the rest of the draft went. And if you look at the way it went, if you were to flip-flop those two, let's say they take Fatanu at 16.
Right.
And you go down to 81 and you start to try and find interior defensive linemen that can make an impact. I mean, you're talking McKinley Jackson, Dwayne Carter, like there's not a lot there.
Right.
Conversely, if they had taken anybody else on defense, even if it hadn't been Murphy, if it had been Newton, if it had been Verse, take your pick, right after Haynes fell, and he had no business being there at 81. Like in every single consensus big board or mock draft you see, he was top 50 player for the most part. But yet right after they take, I got it up here, right after they take Haynes, if they had missed out on him, they could have had Zach Zinter. They could have had Dominic Pooney, who went to the 49ers, who I really liked. There was so much depth at that position. But Haynes, to me, maybe was the best or second best pure guard. We had a lot of interior offensive linemen this year that were centers, guards, could play tackle, slide inside, projections. But to me, he was a godsend at 81. And you have to get lucky sometimes, right? Day 3 felt very Seahawky, right? A lot of, oh, okay. I knew we liked that guy, but that seems a little high compared to what other people are saying. Oh, 2 corners. I thought our corner group was strong. Some of those kinds of surprises. Let's go around the board. Give me a not necessarily a favorite, but just like the thing that stands out to you most about that group they took on day 3. Could be positive or negative. Adam, start with you.
I think one of the things I'm trying to take as a positive is the Tyrese Knight pick. I know it's been panned by so many different people. I mean, a guy who was productive and a linebacker that Macdonald looks at and says, yes, that guy, I can do things with that. And one of the things I said on our show was look, we trusted Pete when it came to corners, right? We took all these 5th, 6th round flyers all the time and pulled guys out of a hat and made them into just really good NFL players. And that was Pete's specialty. And he was awesome at it. And it was something we got to enjoy for 14 years. Well, now Mike Macdonald, linebackers are his thing. So when I see the Tyrese Knight pick, I'm like, oh shoot, there's other guys out there. Like I like Trotter. I like the bloodlines on top of his play. Like that seems like a pretty solid pick. That'd be something I'd be more comfortable with as just a dumb fan who sits and watches the draft. But I've got to trust in Mike Macdonald to know, look, these are the traits I'm looking for. And the things that he doesn't necessarily do well, and some people say that's more on the coverage side of things, I can teach that to him. My system is so good, and I'm so good at teaching this position that we can get the best out of him. So I don't know that I'm super positive on it, but it's what I'm trying to be positive about.
Yeah, I think when it came to that final day, well, to talk about the linebacker pick, man, I just felt like when we talk about luck and those sorts of things, that's probably the area where we didn't have much luck because of the depth of the linebacker class. I thought that the shelf was, I mean, after Gray went off the board, that was kind of the shelf for the linebacker class. And after that happened, and unfortunately, we traded back out of a spot to where he would have been available. It made sense maybe to pick up a couple extra picks, but yeah, that would probably be the one area where I look at as unlucky. But in terms of day 3, I think this is the area that's probably going to define this draft more than the 2 picks the top 2 that we expect to be good. Who comes out of this? Is AJ Barner going to be a tight end who can really fill into that Will Dissly role? I think the guy that I am most interested in seeing is Nehemiah Pritchett out of that group. And because they did take him ahead of a guy like DJ James, who a lot of scouts are saying, oh, well, I like James a whole lot more than Pritchett. But I like Pritchett in the type of style that he plays. And so I'm kind of curious to see what he does and then how they configure that secondary now with going so light at safety and being so deep at corner.
It went from being one of the most settled positions, we thought, to one of the most interesting ones heading into camp.
Yeah, safety's still quite interesting. We'll see how that all shakes. If there are some moves heading into the August in training camp, we'll see. There's still a lot of some really good veterans out there, so that will be interesting. For day 3, Brandon just had EJ Snyder on from Bootleg Football. Dan, you just had Brett Coleman on Bootleg Football. So bootleg everywhere. Why not? Yeah, they're amazing. They're great, right? So and EJ spent a couple of minutes with you, Brandon, talking about Tyrese Knight, about him being like, okay, I can see what Macdonald wants to do with him. And he went into examples of how that type of talent could be deployed. That helped me out because there was a barrage of folks out there like Griffin, we all see Mike Spin move, right? He was like, just rated him pretty low and said, hey, from linebacker stat, like the way they play, it's like, I think he guesses a lot. These are, see Mike Spin moves, paraphrase words. And I respect what he does and how he looks at the game. Certainly a very intelligent guy, right? So that was really cool to see. Dan was like just EJ's take on how a player like Knight can be deployed, which gets to what Adam was saying. I'll just quickly add the caveat of AJ Barner for me. The reason being is like, what type of team do you want to be? There were other types of tight ends still available. We extend Noah Fant, which I was like, oh, that's interesting, especially on the heels of getting Grubb in as the HC, or if that was flip-flopped, what it doesn't matter. It's like, I can see how those two things go together. I get that. I get the Pharaoh Brown piece. I get that as a compliment to what Noah Fant does. And then maybe now it's like 2/3 Pharaoh Brown style, and maybe just a bit more of that hard-nosed, we're going to run the ball and, shove it down your throat a little bit. I would not mind that type of football back in the PNW. So that to me is like the most intriguing piece. But Dan, what about you, dude?
No, I think the tight end thing was interesting too, because there were some guys left that were much more accomplished in the passing game, much better route runners, much more productive in the passing game, and they chose to go with Barner, who I liked. He was probably one of my most mocked players in about that range when I would do mock drafts, just because it seemed the value matched. And he's also one of the younger guys in the class, which I like, in a class that had a bunch of older guys in it. Like, he's 21, he'll be 22 during the season. I like that, but to me, the thing that really stood out, and I'll comment on the Knight thing too, because that was the one that's kind of invoked the ire of a lot of Seahawk fans. And most of that just comes from a place of either not knowing the player at all, and sometimes we dismiss the unknown as unworthy, or because maybe they heard someone else say that they didn't think he was a good player, right? But I'm with you. I've heard enough from people that EJ was great. I feel a lot better about the Tyrese Knight pick after listening to him talk. I think maybe at the linebacker position, as much, if not more than any other position on defense, sometimes you just don't know what the assignment is. And that maybe the way they were coaching him in that scheme was way to beat, right? Watch the play develop instead of just attack. Like early in the process, I really liked Maris Liufau from Notre Dame because he just was always moving forward from the snap of the ball. He's aggressive. He's attacking. Well, that's not necessarily great because you're going to run yourself out of a lot of plays, right? Like, I like the athletic profile, and I like the fact, as you guys pointed out, that if Mike Macdonald endorsed you, especially a little bit earlier than people thought you were going to go, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. And now I can't wait to see him play. Like, he's one of the guys I'm most excited to see get on the field in preseason games. The rest of it, I was struck by the selection of the cornerbacks. I love the offensive line picks. I think it's possible that 3 years from now, we're looking at a Mike Carroll right tackle, Christian Haynes right guard, Olu Oluwatimi center, Sateo Lamea left guard, where they played him a little bit in minicamp this week, and then Charles Cross on the left side. That could be the future starting offensive line. But all leading up to the draft, we heard Schneider talk about his process. And one of the cool nuggets that I think he talked about this year that he hadn't gone into detail about before was how early in the draft, they go best player available. Later in the draft, they draft for need. Well, if you're drafting for need in the 5th and 6th round, you're not taking cornerbacks. So we had heard that for a month, and then he just went, oh, geez, there's value there, because I have seen James, Pritchett, as well as LeMay actually show up on a lot of value lists of guys that had those players rated a lot higher than they were actually taken. So
it depends on how you define need, though, too. And as a general manager, you could define need in a way that says, hey, we got guys coming up for contracts. This is an area of the team that we don't want to pay long-term guys. And we've had success not paying guys long-term. Where do we need to build youth then for the future once those players then depart?
Or has this occurred to any of you guys? And be interested in your thoughts on this, especially as it might pertain to a guy like Reek Woolen, or even how they plan to use Devin Witherspoon. There are things we don't know. Maybe they don't like some of the guys on the roster the way that we think they should.
I'm gonna beach ball that one up to the quadrant. Adam, that's yours, man.
Yeah. So it's interesting that you bring up Reek. I have another theory on why the cornerbacks may have been drafted as well, but with Reek and his style of play being just unbelievably soft in absolutely refusing to tackle, does that sound like the type of player that Mike Macdonald is looking for? I'm not sure that it is. In the idea that maybe they're searching for a replacement there, I don't think it's that far-fetched, considering that it's not like his draft pedigree is super high. He had his great rookie year, and then I think we can all agree that his play regressed last year. It's not out of the question that they're looking to move on from there. Not to mention, like, how long are they going to rely on depth pieces like Mike Jack and, Trey Brown and things like that? They may be looking a different direction there. But the other way I thought about it was now on special teams with the new kickoff rules and the way that the coverage is going to work, I wonder if maybe the corners, having depth guys that you draft for special teams needs later on in the draft, corner might be a good one to take there. Mainly because you're going to need some guys to cover some ground in a hurry and still be able to tackle, instead of maybe relying on your 5th and 6th wide receiver to do it. Maybe you're relying on a little deeper corner room.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see not just how the execution of that new kickoff rule comes into play. I suspect and I hope that it brings the play back into the game, but also roster management, and teams having to place more of a priority on those guys now. It might create opportunity for some players that otherwise didn't have one.
Yeah, it's just a shame that DJ Dallas is no longer with us.
Well, we'll still get to see him play 2 times a year.
Correct.
With the Cardinals. Any of the Clinton, go right back to you to start off. Any of the undrafted guys that you've kind of come to know since they were announced that you particularly like?
Yes. For me, there's quite a few and that are cool, but I'll pick one, and it's the one that everybody knows. It's the name, right? I like Westover, and the reason I like Westover, well, there's 2 reasons, but they go together as one thing. Grubb knows what he's getting in this piece, and I think he understands that he's getting a kind of a special sauce type of player. We don't have what he is without him on the roster. Like he's one of one on this roster. Can he be the halfback? Can he be put in motion? Can he block inline? Can he carry the ball sometimes? Yes. Check the box on his versatility and what he could do. Like when the Niners come out and, Juszczyk is doing things, and then it's over to Kittle, and then there's a drag across the middle, and, Debo's not getting tackled, and then Juszczyk's blasting somebody for McCaffrey. I get kind of jealous of that, Dan. It's like, I like what I see with the versatility and the way they move him around. Maybe we have something like that with Westover, and that's why I gravitate towards there, man.
Brandon.
Ken Walker is one of my favorite players on the team. And so when I watched George Holani out of Boise, that excited me a little bit, just because I have this worry that if a guy like K9 goes down, and we've seen running backs get injured a ton over the years, like who can even do a little bit of that? And Zach Charbonnet is a very different style of back. So I don't necessarily put that on him. We haven't seen a whole lot of our other back because he got injured in the very first mock game of the year. So we don't know much about him. And I don't think he has that same type of running style that K9 has either. But yeah, watching some George Holani, the balance that he has, he doesn't have the explosion, obviously, that Walker has. Otherwise, he would have gone in the second round too. But just between the balance and the ability to kind of break tackles and pick up yards, I think that could end up being a nice addition. Even if he's just stashed on the practice squad and then ultimately has to get called up due to injury. But that's, when you're looking at UDFAs, that's kind of what you're looking for.
I have to wonder in his case, if they had him in on one of their 30 visits, if they've really been working on him for a while, because I thought it was going to be difficult for them to sign any of the better free agent running backs that weren't drafted, because that room is so young and so deep. Those guys are going to go elsewhere where they think there's more opportunity. So to kind of be on him all through the process and then end up getting him, I wonder, not that they're going to make assurances to anyone in that situation, but that they see a clear path for him to make it.
It's not that deep. I mean, if I'm a free agent running back and I can go, now, but, Kenny McIntosh got injured, I could probably beat him out this year.
Yeah. Adam, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm going to basically punt on this question because I do not get down into the nitty-gritty of UDFA guys. I mean, I basically went through and watched a little bit of Westover and that sort of thing, and I can see the things that Clinton is excited about for sure. But honestly, when it starts getting down to those sort of levels of players in college, like I don't spend the time going back and looking at those guys. I mean, I'm looking forward to the things that we hear from OTAs and how guys actually start to perform, because I don't have the expertise to look at those guys.
But you're the quarterback guy. You mean you didn't study Chevin Cordero?
No, that was one that was not on the list. I did not get to Cordero, and you think I'd have gone back and looked at him at this point, but I have a feeling that he's going to be a camp arm. So we'll see how it goes, I suppose.
Yeah, one of the early reports I heard out of the first day of rookie minicamp was Sam Howell and Geno Smith don't have anything to worry about.
That does not surprise me at all.
With the guys that had it, and then the younger Tunga Vailoa and who's weighs in about, I don't know, he's about 4'11", and then I don't know,
5 yards.
Did you guys see the picture today of the third guy? I can't even remember. It's Corey Turner or something like that. They had another invite. And the guy was standing there getting ready to run a drill. They've got him in Drew Lock's number 2 in a red jersey. Did you guys see this at all?
No.
Not yet.
He's standing there. I thought it was photoshopped. He makes me look like I'm in shape. And there were a lot of who was the dude? Gosh darn it! Recently passed away. The 300-pound
Oh yeah, the Pillsbury throw boy.
Played for the Giants and played for Kentucky, and he played Jared.
Hefty lefty, right?
Yeah.
We all know his nicknames.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. We can all picture him, but I'll blurt it out later when I think about it.
Yeah.
That's Jared something, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
Adam, speaking of quarterbacks, I love all the work you did on the show and digging into those guys. I love your process on it. Were you disappointed / surprised at all that yet again, they don't draft a quarterback at any point?
I was a little surprised. It felt like John was just itching to do it finally after years and years of not doing it. And you kind of wondered if maybe that was a Pete thing, trying to protect Russ maybe, and all of that stuff. But I was surprised that Jordan Travis.
Nope.
We lost him.
Did we lose Adam? Surprised Jordan Travis went to the Jets. Let's go to you, Brandon. It's
Jared Lorenzen.
Jared Lorenzen. There it was.
And
did you Google that, or did it come to you?
No,
Adam, are you back? Oh, I saw him move there for a minute. Well, when we get him back.
There we go.
Yeah.
Back.
Sorry, man.
We lost you at you were surprised with where Jordan Travis went.
Yeah, just that I guess I'm not surprised he went that late, just because I know how he was rated on most people's boards, but I really like the kid, and I think he's got a ton of upside and would have been a fantastic project quarterback to definitely supplant Sam Howell. I'm not a Sam Howell guy in any way, shape, or form, but I think he would have been a great mentee for Geno Smith for sure. But yeah, we'll see if they take a crack at it next year. Maybe the board didn't just quote unquote fall right. That's what John always says. So I guess I'm a tiny bit disappointed, because I think there was some talented guys there towards the back end of the draft.
John should probably just stop talking about that, right? Until he drafts one, because he's the one that usually brings it up. Yeah. I did find, as the draft was nearing its completion, and I was actually doing a live reaction show as it was winding down, so I wasn't sure up until the very end, but Michael Pratt almost got out of this thing without getting drafted. And I would have been really curious if he had made it through, if the Seahawks would have been in on him. Brandon, what do you think? John talked about it again last week. He was asked what the plan is at quarterback, and he kind of laughed it off. I get the question. It came from a very, very legitimate, qualified, outstanding reporter in Greg Bell, but the timing of it seemed a little bit odd. And his answer was basically, we have who we have right now. I don't know what the plan is. We'll see how it goes. Do you see this as given the potential cap hit next year with Geno and everything else, is this a make or break year for him? Do you think they need to make a decision between one of these two guys of who they're going to carry through to 2025 by the end of the season?
I don't know if you have to make a decision necessarily between those guys. And I can understand why John kind of laughed off the question too, because how do you really plan beyond about 2 years at really any position on the field? And at quarterback, it seems like, they made the transition from Russ relatively easy. The only thing that bothers me a little bit about quarterback is we can't, as fans, seem to like really get behind one guy since Geno's come on board. And it feels like how I remember it being toward the end of the Matt Hasselbeck era. Like everybody's like, well, it's kind of feeling like time to move on from Matt. Do we like Mike Teal as a potential backup? Yeah. How about him? So I want people to see in Geno also, like what I think a lot of us do, that he's really good and has that ability, but he's just because he's not, I don't know, top 5. It's hard, I think, for everybody to get around that, and because he's also not 25, right? I think people are ready to kind of want to know who's going to be that next guy for the next 10 years.
Yeah, my piece there, I've been saying this for a while, is the designation that he's a bridge quarterback. He's only that. He's just a bridge quarterback, and with the whether they say it or they don't, I think it's implied, and you're not going to win with a bridge quarterback. And some say it, flat out loud. I just reject it in the sense that he's already 2 years in. as our starter. He's going into year 3. He's 34, right? This season, and not a lot of tread, if you will, on himself as a quarterback. Quarterbacks play into the late 30s, 40s. They keep themselves in way different shape than they used to keep themselves in general, the Terry Bradshaw years. And I just reject this notion that, well, this is Geno's last year. There's so much out there. Well, this is going to be it. It's like there's a balloon payment coming. All right, yeah, it goes up. And what if he's top 8-ish with a improved offensive line and a kind of a net new good flowing offense that doesn't just hit the doldrums for no apparent reason, twice a game. And he's 7th best in the league. Then you look at that number and say, all right, that's still a pretty damn good deal. So let's just ride with this guy another year and let's go. So for me, Dan, I am so in the Geno's a top 10-ish quarterback and he could pitch higher. And I think they're just going to re-sign him next year or just keep him and then maybe extend him a bit, kick the money down the road a bit and figure it out cap wise. But I think that's the most logical conclusion is that in 2025, Geno's our starter because he's a good quarterback. And I don't know, Dan, what do you think, man?
I love the Hasselbeck comparison because that's one that I've made in the past too. I think during Hasselbeck's entire career, he was polarizing within the fan base in much the same way. A lot of Seahawks fans hated him and thought he was trash and wanted to move on from him. I had this argument with my dad for 10 years. He's terrible. Get rid of him. Okay, who are you going to replace him with? And he would name 10 guys. How are you going to get those? Any one of those 10 guys, right? I think Geno's kind of in that same sort of middle ground. And what's compelling to me about this coming season is whereas, the Geno Smith story has been cool to this point, regardless of how good you think he is as a player, the story's cool because not many guys who have been seen as busts and lose the opportunity to be a starter in the league ever get it back again to the level that he has. I think the story's just beginning because this season with what I think we now can assume is going to be an improved offensive line in front of him, tons of weapons. He's surrounded by weapons everywhere and potentially a coaching staff that can get more out of him. Because at the same time, we're going to find out how good Shane Waldron really was or wasn't with what has going on in Chicago. Right. So of all the different range of possibilities, like what if Geno goes out and has a great year and throws for 4,500 yards and 39 touchdowns and 7 picks and gets all pro votes? Well, then that $54 million cap hit, if he hits a bunch of his escalators, is meaningless because then you tear up the last year of his deal and sign him to a new 3-year deal. Like this idea that he's this aging quarterback and they need to figure out what's next. He's 2-ish years younger than Kirk Cousins, who just signed for $100 million guaranteed for 2 years coming off an Achilles. Like, as you said, Clinton, that's kind of a myth. Like quarterbacks can play deep into their early 40s. And I think Geno's game is suited to playing into his 40s. So yeah, it's possible that we made this move for Sam Howell and he never sees the field and Geno's the guy moving forward.
We also don't know how the coaches might view it because they could be looking at that, trying to figure out who the 10-year guy is versus the 2-year guy. And how are they going to react if Geno goes out there and it's a new offense, but what if the interior of the offensive line doesn't come together as well and he ends up struggling out of the gate for 3 games? Are they going to have that pressure then on them to go, oh, well, maybe we should move to Sam Howell? Like we don't know how they'll manage it.
Yeah. And it's all up to Geno, man. He's, it's in his hands.
It's up to Grubb. It's not up to Geno. We know what Geno is. He's a top 13 quarterback in the league year in, year out. A guy who's super clutch in the fourth quarter. He led he's tied or led the league for fourth quarter comebacks this year. Like, how much is that guy worth going forward? I think that's a guy that you do pay and can restructure. And one of the big differences between him and Hasselbeck towards the end was I remember Hasselbeck running into the end zone and just crumpling on the ground and having a broken back and not even touched. Like his body just decided that it wasn't going to have it anymore. Yeah. And Geno's a long ways away from that. Like he looks fresh and spry. He's a very good professional quarterback. Now, the only way that I see Geno struggling is if a guy with no NFL experience as an offensive coordinator, a guy who ran a pass-happy offense in college, comes in and tries to do that in the NFL, he's going to struggle, and the offense is going to struggle. I don't care how much talent they have on the outside. They need to commit to a bludgeoning running game and actually get back to playing that sort of football. If Mike Macdonald, practices what he preaches, then let's hope we see that out of Grubb. But it's not on the tape in college. And that would be the thing that would hold Geno back, in my opinion, is if they can't commit to a decent running game to allow him to operate off of play action and do the things he does well.
It's an interesting point because we've heard in conversations about Michael Penix Jr. when there was a lot of speculation that he might be on Seattle's radar. Is we didn't see him utilize the middle of the field in college, and was that a blind spot of his and a weakness in his game, or was that something in the way that Grubb called a game that might be a blind spot in how he coordinates an offense? We'll find out, because that's one thing that Geno does very, very well, is use the middle of the field. So just add that to the list of, things that we're going to look at. We can't wait to see unfold. If tomorrow was opening day and we get to see this team play, the full 53-man roster, all the starters playing a complete game all the way through. If there's one aspect that each of you just cannot wait to see first, it can be as small as a particular player or a position group or just a schematic thing, what would that thing be? Clinton, we'll start with you.
I am going to go right to the trenches. Abe Lucas's health is paramount at right tackle, and Charles Cross taking another leap forward and like third year taking a big leap. To me, though, they're the anchors. And I like the upgrades in the middle. I think, hopefully Olu does his thing at center. We talked about Haynes already. We'll see about the other tackle position, whether that's Lakin or otherwise. But just kind of back. We have 2 third-year tackles, one who barely played last year and one who's been, I'd say, average to sometimes above average at left tackle. And I think has talent. And with Grubb's style, can he get him moving more? Can he use some of his movement skills more? And I think the answer is yes. But that's it, man. Like, a couple of series in, if we see those guys anchoring and really, really holding up well, early and often, of course, lots can happen in the season, Dan, but I'm going to be fixated on, like, what's it look like for Geno? Is he getting clean looks? Do our running backs, like Kenneth Walker made yards magically appear last year. The dude was hitting the backfield all the time. I know. Like, imagine if he doesn't have to. He gets a little bit of daylight. Yeah. So that's where I'll be focused. If we see that pitching the right way early, very good signs for me, man.
And then you start to see stuff that you saw on his like Michigan State tape where, he gets a crease and he gets to the second level and then he just gets to do his thing, right? Yeah. Straight ahead instead of weaving through everybody.
Yeah. Correct.
Brandon.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that too. But the thing that the reason why so many of us wanted Mike Macdonald as a head coach, even when his name was brought up as a candidate, is because of what we saw him do with the Ravens defense, what we saw him do with the Michigan defense when he was coaching in college. And so I'm excited to see what that translates to with the Seahawks defense after last year and just 1 year transition. How close is that potentially going to look? And we're going to know, I think, pretty soon if it's going to, if we go, oh, well, maybe it's still going to take another year or two, because, I think a lot of us want to see that magical change overnight. It may not happen right away, but I at least want to see elements of that, because that's why we wanted Mike as our coach.
Indeed.
Yeah, it's not even necessarily a player or position group or what a specific coach does. It's a sense of style and physicality. I want this team to be physical again. When we were dominant, everybody was afraid to play Cam Chancellor in the Seahawks. Like, they were shaking in their boots. They circled that game on the calendar and knew that they were going to have to strap it up.
Yeah, that's the thing that stands out for me. I live here in the city. I've had season tickets since '84. And the last couple of years, honestly, I've stopped going to every home game. Like, I'll wait till the schedule comes out and I'll kind of I'll space it out, right? If there's 3 games in a month, I'll pick 1 or 2 to go to, and I might give a few to friends or coworkers. I want to go to every game again, because I want that stadium to be electric. And the way that you get that back again is by kicking ass up front on defense. And that's what I can't wait to see the most. Like, this time a year ago, coming off the draft, we were all still really concerned about that defensive line. They had gone out, they had flushed everybody out. They had gone out and signed Draymond Jones. They brought Jaron Reed back, and then they took Cam Young and Mike Morris in the draft. And that was kind of it. They hadn't even signed Mario Edwards yet. And here we are a year later, and they have all those guys back, minus Edwards. Plus they trade for Leonard Williams. Plus you bring in Jonathan Hankins. Plus you add maybe the best defensive interior lineman in the draft. And now you're adding to a strength. And I want to get back to that, man, where they're getting off the ball so quick before the lineman can even react because the crowd's going nuts, and they're not being complacent, waiting till the last second to start yelling the way they have the last couple of years, and to where that becomes a strength again, because there is nothing more demoralizing as a player, I imagine, but as a fan, than just not being able to stop anybody on defense, just watching teams have their way with you, no matter how good you are on offense. And there were moments the last couple of years where the Seahawks were pretty good on offense.
I'm tired of being bullied. I am sick and tired of being bullied by the Niners, and even the Rams have out
and the Steelers.
That was
we needed that game, and we got mowed down, right?
Was that game was that the nail in the coffin for Pete? Because that was the one game where I looked at it and just saw an effort problem.
Likely. I mean, it may even have been the Ravens game.
It was great that day.
Yeah.
But everybody else mailed it in.
And Dan, when you were saying what you were saying, I'm on tons of like Zoom like calls for work life, and I was searching for the heart emoji so that I could throw up on the screen while you were doing it. I was like, just give me that heart emoji, man, because I know how Brandon feels about this. I know Adam feels about this. So I think we're all wanting to drink from the same drink here, man. It's like just physical kick ass team that just. Look, the Niners had a nice little run, and they didn't get their chip, right? They did not get their chip. So let's just take it back from them. Like, no. We're going to be the bullies again. How nice would that be to be the bullies again? So
slam that window shut.
Yes.
It's not going to be easy though, right? I mean, just 2 years ago, we thought the Cardinals were,
for sure,
had checked out probably for good, and that the Rams were falling apart and their window was closing. And I mean, now, gosh, I don't know. This might be on the verge of being one of the best divisions in football again in a year or two. We might, as we look back.
Yeah.
Guys, this was awesome. I've been wanting to do this for a while. We finally got our schedules together. This was a lot of fun. If any of you who are watching this or listening to this don't listen to the Seahawkers pod or watch it, you're missing out. I think what you guys do and the chemistry you guys have and how you interact is the best out there. And so it was it was nice to sprinkle a little bit of that on the Seahawks Forever from this side.
Appreciate you having us, Dan.
How are you guys going to handle the next couple months? Because sometimes topics get a little tough to come by over May and June before camp kicks off. What are your plans for the pod?
Well, we probably have some big news that we're about to break with regard to the show. So I suppose we could talk a little bit about it here, but it looks like we will be joining the Believe podcast network. And so we're actually the shows that you remember being on the Field Goals podcast. We ported those over to the Seahawkers podcast feed. We're actually going to be breaking those out again and taking those over to the Believe network. So Seahawkers podcast will, kind of be how it was traditionally for the past couple of years. But we're going to have to come up with stuff though. I mean, we got training camp these next couple of weeks. We got, and then, I mean, the fun part is to look ahead to the season. And once we have the schedule and we know the opponents in what order we're going to see them. And in the off season, we always do our breakdowns too against our divisional opponents and talk about how we're going to smoke all of them in this next season.
Well, the NFL always throws us a couple of bones. We'll get the schedule out next week.
Yeah,
allegedly. I don't know why it's such a damn mystery. What date it's coming, but they like to build up that mystery. So at least we'll get that, and then we can start to get a picture of like how the year might fall. But no, it's so great. And for those of you watching, I'll make sure that you have all their information. All the links will be down below where you can catch the pod and follow them on Twitter and everything else. And I know I said at the top of the show that this is the first time I've had 3 guests on. I don't know how obvious it was, but we've had 4 this whole time. So
yeah.
Spooky's missing her mama today. So we decided to make an appearance. Guys, thanks very much. And we'll do this again. Let's get together again and do kind of a roundtable before the season starts and preview the whole thing once we know more.
Let's do it.
Absolutely. Awesome. Love it.
Thanks
guys. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
As I say many times, and I'm sure you've heard me say it, there is a lot of really great Seahawks content out there. And some of you may think we're competitors. I like to think of us as colleagues. It's why I have so many of those guys on the show. And judging by the comments, a lot of you really appreciate bringing those perspectives together as well. So I meant it when I said it. If you haven't listened to their podcast or watched it, definitely do. Until next time, you can follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. I'm Dan. This is Seahawks Forever. I'll be continuing my look around the NFC West coming up this week with a look at the Rams and the Cardinals and what they've done this offseason to position themselves for the regular season. And then I have some cool stuff lined up for these next couple of months that can be a little bit slower as well. Try to make it as interesting for you as possible. So stay tuned for that. Until then, forever and always, go Hawks. Thanks for watching.